My name is Natalie Mitchell, and I'm 34 years old. I sit rigid in the waiting room, watching Kyle's knee bounce nervously beside me. After months of unexplained weight loss, night sweats, and fatigue, my husband finally agreed to see a doctor. 8 years of seemingly perfect marriage, yet something feels off lately. The secret of phone calls. The password changes. Last night, I glimpsed a text on his phone that made my stomach drop. Now, Dr. Hayes emerges from his office, his expression grave as he calls us in. The look in his eyes tells me he already knows something that's about to shatter my world. Before I begin my story, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to join me on this painful journey of betrayal and survival. Kyle and I met during our sophomore year of college. We were the couple everyone envied, college sweethearts who married right after graduation. Our wedding day remains etched in my memory. Kyle's eyes welling up as I walked down the aisle, the way he whispered forever before kissing me. That was 8 years ago. Since then, we'd built what I thought was a perfect life together. I worked as a high school counselor, a job that fulfilled my desire to help troubled teens navigate their formative years. Kyle climbed the corporate ladder at Meridian Financial, eventually becoming a senior financial advisor. We saved diligently for years to afford our charming 3-bedroom home in a quiet suburban neighborhood with tree-lined streets and friendly neighbors. We'd spent countless weekends painting walls, planting a garden, and making it truly ours. It was our sanctuary, the place where we planned to raise our future children. The first signs that something wasn't right began about 6 months ago. Kyle started losing weight without trying. At first, he joked about finally getting his college body back, but the weight continued to drop alarmingly. Then came the night sweats. I'd wake to find his side of the bed damp, his pillow soaked through. He'd wave off my concerns, blaming a particularly stressful period at work. "The Hoffman account is killing me," he'd say, referencing a difficult client. "Once we close the deal, everything will go back to normal." But nothing went back to normal. Instead, the fatigue set in. Kyle, once an avid runner who never missed his Saturday morning 10K, now struggled to climb the stairs without becoming winded. He started taking naps after work, something he'd never done before. Still, he refused to see a doctor. "It's just stress, Nat. Everyone at the office is feeling it," he insisted whenever I brought it up. What finally convinced him was the fainting episode. We were hosting a dinner party for our closest friends, Grace and Tom Miller. Grace had been my roommate in college and had actually introduced me to Kyle. Over the years, the four of us had remained inseparable, vacationing together and sharing weekly dinner rotations. That night, while carrying a tray of drinks from the kitchen, Kyle suddenly went pale and collapsed. He was only unconscious for a few seconds, but it terrified all of us. "That's it," Grace said firmly after we'd helped Kyle to the couch. "You're seeing a doctor, or I'm calling an ambulance right now." Tom, usually laid back and joking, nodded in serious agreement. "This isn't normal, man. Something's wrong." Finally, Kyle relented and promised to make an appointment. As I reflect back on those early years of our marriage, I remember our ambitious plans. We'd travel to Europe before starting a family at 35. We'd retire early and buy that lake house we'd always dreamed about. Kyle was always the planner between us, mapping out our financial future with meticulous spreadsheets and investment strategies. That's what made his recent behavior all the more confusing. In the months leading up to his health decline, Kyle had become increasingly withdrawn. He'd take phone calls in another room, lowering his voice when I walked by. His phone, once casually left on countertops or bedside tables, was now always in his pocket, screen down when set aside. He'd added a fingerprint lock, claiming it was a new company security policy. "All client information has to be protected," he explained when I noticed. Was I imagining the way he wouldn't quite meet my eyes? Our sex life had dwindled too, with Kyle frequently claiming exhaustion. At first, I attributed it to his declining health, but a nagging feeling told me there was more to the story. The night before the doctor's appointment, I did something I'd never done before. While Kyle was showering, I checked his phone, which he'd left on the nightstand, momentarily unlocked. What I found sent ice through my veins. A text message thread with someone saved simply as it contained exchanges that left little to the imagination. "Miss you already," read one. "Last night was incredible," said another. The most recent, "When can you get away again?" "Same hotel?" I barely had time to process what I was seeing before I heard the shower turn off. I quickly put the phone back exactly as I'd found it, my heart hammering in my chest. As I lay awake that night, listening to Kyle's increasingly labored breathing beside me, I wondered if his illness and these messages were somehow connected. The next morning, I drove us to Dr. Hayes' office, my mind spinning with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. Dr. Hayes' office embodied everything I'd always disliked about medical facilities. The harsh fluorescent lighting emphasized the clinical whiteness of the walls. Anatomical posters displaying various body systems hung as silent reminders of human frailty. The faint smell of antiseptic seemed to intensify my growing anxiety. After nearly an hour in the waiting room, a nurse called us back. She took Kyle's vitals, frowning slightly at his blood pressure and temperature readings before leading us to an examination room. Dr. Hayes entered shortly after, a manila folder in his hands and a carefully neutral expression on his face. "Kyle, Natalie, good to see you both," he said, though his tone suggested this meeting would be anything but good. He was in his mid-50s with salt and pepper hair and the kind of weathered face that spoke of years delivering both miraculous recoveries and devastating diagnoses. He began by asking Kyle about his symptoms, nodding as my husband recounted the weight loss, fatigue, night sweats, and recent fainting spell. He asked about appetite changes, respiratory issues, and several other symptoms I hadn't even noticed. Kyle confirmed most of them. "I've had the lab work from your preliminary visit analyzed," Dr. Hayes said, opening the folder. "And I'd like to run a few more tests today." After a thorough examination and additional blood draw, Dr. Hayes sat down on his rolling stool, his expression grave. "Kyle, would you mind if I spoke with Natalie alone for a moment?" Kyle stiffened beside me. "Anything you need to tell me, you can say in front of my wife." Dr. Hayes nodded slowly. "Of course. I just thought." "We don't keep secrets," Kyle interrupted, reaching for my hand. The irony of his words made my stomach clench, thinking of those text messages. "Very well." Dr. Hayes took a deep breath. "Kyle, based on your symptoms and the test results, I'm concerned about an immunodeficiency issue." My mind immediately went to cancer. "Leukemia, maybe, or lymphoma." I squeezed Kyle's hand, preparing for the worst. "Your HIV test came back positive." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. I felt Kyle's hand go limp in mine. "That's impossible," I said automatically. "There must be some mistake." Dr. Hayes' expression was sympathetic but firm. "We ran the test twice to confirm. The results are conclusive, and based on your CD4 count and viral load, this isn't a recent infection. From these numbers, I'd estimate you've been HIV positive for at least a year, possibly longer." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "HIV? How was that possible?" "We'd been married for 8 years, monogamous, or so I thought." The text messages flashed in my mind again, suddenly taking on a much more sinister meaning. "But we're married," I said stupidly, as if the gold band on my finger should have provided some magical protection. "Natalie," Dr. Hayes said gently, "I would strongly recommend you get tested as soon as possible." I nodded numbly, barely processing his words. Kyle sat frozen beside me, his face drained of all color. "The good news, Dr. Hayes continued, is that with modern antiretroviral therapy, HIV is a manageable chronic condition. It's no longer the death sentence it once was. But we need to start treatment immediately to prevent progression to AIDS." He continued talking about treatment plans, specialist referrals, and support groups, but his words washed over me like white noise. All I could think about was the mathematical impossibility of what I was hearing. If Kyle had been infected for at least a year, and we'd been monogamous, the logical conclusion was unavoidable. Dr. Hayes must have recognized my shock because he paused his medical explanations and handed me a pamphlet. This has resources for partners of newly diagnosed patients. I know this is overwhelming. Take some time to process it. He then focused on Kyle, discussing immediate next steps and prescribing preliminary medications. Kyle nodded mechanically, asking no questions, showing no emotion. As we left the office, a nurse discreetly handed me a card for the hospital's counseling services and another for an HIV testing center with same-day results. Her eyes held a knowing sympathy that made me want to scream. The drive home was conducted in complete silence. Kyle stared out the passenger window, his profile like stone. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, trying to control my breathing, trying not to fall apart while operating a vehicle. Halfway home, Kyle finally spoke. "Nat, I can explain." "Not now," I said through clenched teeth. "Not while I'm driving." He fell silent again, but I could feel his eyes on me, watching, assessing, perhaps trying to gauge how much I had already figured out. My mind raced with questions. Who was he sleeping with? How long had it been going on? How many others had been exposed? And the question that kept circling back like a vulture, was our entire marriage a lie? As I pulled into our driveway, the house I'd once seen as our sanctuary now looked like a stage set where I'd been playing the role of the devoted wife in some twisted production. I turned off the engine and sat motionless, unable to bring myself to enter that house with him, to continue the farce for even one more minute. "Natalie," Kyle began again, his voice breaking. I cut him off. "I saw the texts, Kyle. Last night." "Who is a?" The moment we stepped inside our home, the facade crumbled completely. The space that had witnessed countless dinner parties, movie nights, and lazy Sunday mornings now felt alien, contaminated by secrets. I threw my purse on the counter and whirled to face Kyle. "Start talking." He sank onto our couch, head in his hands. "I don't even know where to begin." "How about with who you've been sleeping with?" My voice came out sharper than I'd ever heard it. "That seems like a logical starting point." Kyle looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "It's not what you think." "Really?" "Because I think you've been cheating on me and contracted HIV in the process." "Please, tell me how that's not what I think." "It wasn't supposed to happen," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was just going to be one time." "Who is she, Kyle?" I demanded, though part of me already suspected. He hesitated, then, "Allison. From the office." Allison Parker. Young, ambitious, beautiful Allison Parker. She'd started at Meridian Financial about 18 months ago. I'd met her at the company Christmas party last year, where Kyle had introduced her as a promising new financial analyst he was mentoring. I remembered thinking how professionally he spoke about her, with no hint of anything inappropriate. "How long?" I asked, my voice deadly calm despite the storm inside me. Kyle swallowed hard. "About a year." A year. The timeline matched Dr. Hayes' estimate perfectly. I laughed bitterly at the cruel coincidence. "It started at a conference in Chicago," he continued, words tumbling out now. "We were working late on a presentation, had a few drinks in the hotel bar. One thing led to another." He trailed off, perhaps realizing how pathetically cliched his explanation sounded. "And you just couldn't stop after that one magical night?" The sarcasm in my voice could have cut glass. "I tried to end it several times," he insisted. "But it was complicated. We worked closely together, and she threatened to tell our boss about us if I broke it off." "So you were blackmailed into an affair?" I wasn't buying it. "No, that's not. I was weak, Nat. I made terrible choices." His voice cracked. "When I started feeling sick, I convinced myself it was just stress, maybe a prolonged flu. I never imagined." "Does she know about your diagnosis?" Kyle shook his head. "No. You're the only one who knows besides Dr. Hayes." The realization hit me like a physical blow. Allison could be infected too. She could be unknowingly spreading the virus to others. Regardless of my feelings toward the woman who'd slept with my husband, no one deserved that. You have to tell her, I said. I know, he whispered. I will. When? Tomorrow? Next week? After how many more people get exposed? My voice rose with each question. I'll call her tonight, he promised. I swear. I paced the living room, my mind racing. Were there others besides Allison? Kyle's hesitation told me everything I needed to know. How many? I demanded. Just one other, he admitted. It was nothing serious, just a few times with someone I met at the gym. But that ended months ago. I felt physically ill. The man sitting before me was a stranger wearing my husband's face. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind? Did you ever think about me? I asked, my voice breaking for the first time. About my health? My future? Natalie, please, Kyle stood, reaching for me. I never meant to hurt you. I love you. I stepped back, avoiding his touch. Love? You've been sleeping with other women for a year, bringing a deadly virus into our bed, and you have the audacity to talk about love? Tears streamed down his face. I know I've destroyed everything. I know that. But please, Nat, I'm sick. I need you. Don't leave me now. The emotional manipulation in his plea struck me like a slap. After everything he'd done, he was trying to use his illness to keep me tethered to him. You don't get to play that card, I said coldly. You didn't think about consequences when you were cheating, and you don't get to use your diagnosis as a get-out-of-jail-free card now. What are you saying? Fear flashed in his eyes. I'm saying I need space. I can't even look at you right now. I grabbed my purse and keys. I'm going to a hotel. And tomorrow, I'm getting tested. Natalie, please don't go, Kyle begged, following me to the door. We can work through this. I'll do anything. I turned to face him one last time before leaving. You've already done everything, Kyle. That's the problem. I made it as far as the driveway before the tears came. Sitting in my car, sobs racked my body as the full weight of betrayal crashed over me. My marriage, my health, my entire future, all had been gambling chips in Kyle's game of deception. Instead of driving to a hotel, I found myself heading to the guest bedroom in our home. I couldn't bring myself to sleep in our marital bed, but I also couldn't face explaining my situation to a hotel receptionist or friend. I locked the door, ignoring Kyle's pleas from the hallway, and collapsed onto the bed in exhaustion. That night, as I stared at the ceiling in the dark, I wondered how many times Kyle had come home from being with Allison or his gym fling and kissed me goodnight. How many times had he lied about working late when he was really in someone else's bed? The man I'd built my life around, planned a future with, was a carefully constructed fiction. Tomorrow I would get tested. Tomorrow I would begin untangling the web of lies. But tonight, I allowed myself to grieve for the marriage I thought I had, and the future that would never be. The HIV testing center was located in a discreet medical building downtown. I arrived when they opened, desperate to know my status as quickly as possible. The counselor who took my information was kind and non-judgmental as I explained my situation through tears. These rapid tests are quite accurate, she assured me. We'll have results in about 20 minutes. Those were the longest 20 minutes of my life. I sat in the waiting area, thumbing through outdated magazines without registering a single word, watching the second hand on the wall clock move with excruciating slowness. When the counselor finally called me back, her smile told me everything before she spoke. Your test is negative, Natalie. Relief flooded through me so intensely that my knees nearly buckled. I wasn't infected. I hadn't contracted the virus that was now permanently part of Kyle's life. We'll want you to come back in 3 months for a follow-up test, just to be absolutely certain, she explained. But based on the timeline you've given me about your husband's activities, this negative result is very encouraging." I nodded, grateful for the first piece of good news in what felt like an eternity of nightmare. With the immediate health crisis addressed, my mind turned to the other aspect of this tangled web, Allison Parker. She might be infected and not even know it. Despite my anger toward her, basic human decency demanded that she be informed. Kyle had promised to call her, but could I trust him to follow through? After all, every other promise he'd made to me had been broken. Back at home, while Kyle was napping, his fatigue now making terrible sense, I took his laptop from his home office. We knew each other's passwords, at least, we used to. I was relieved to find he hadn't changed his email login. His inbox revealed hundreds of exchanges with Allison, going back further than the year he'd admitted to. They were careful, using coded language and vague references that wouldn't immediately flag as inappropriate if accidentally seen by the wrong person. But reading them in sequence, knowing what I now knew, the romantic and sexual nature of their relationship was unmistakable. One particular email caught my attention. Allison had written, "A is counting the hours until Friday." So she was A from the text messages. In other emails, I found references to hotels, meeting times disguised as project deadlines, and intimate inside jokes. What truly gutted me were the emails where they discussed me. "Wife thinks I'm at a conference this weekend," Kyle had written. And Allison's response, "Poor thing has no idea. You're too good at keeping secrets." They had laughed about deceiving me. Made me the punchline of their affair. As I scrolled through months of correspondence, another revelation emerged. Allison Parker wasn't just Kyle's coworker, she was also my coworker's sister. Megan Davis, the school's English teacher, had mentioned her younger sister moving to town last year for a finance job. I'd even seen pictures of Allison on Megan's desk but had never made the connection until now. I found myself facing a moral dilemma. I despised Allison for her role in destroying my marriage, but she deserved to know about her potential HIV exposure. And if Kyle hadn't told her as promised, the responsibility fell to me. After hours of internal debate, I texted Allison from my own phone, "This is Natalie Mitchell, Kyle's wife. We need to talk. It's urgent and concerns your health. Coffee at Westside Cafe tomorrow at 2 p.m. Her reply came almost immediately, "I don't think that's a good idea." I responded simply, "Kyle tested positive for HIV yesterday. Your choice if you want to hear more." That got her attention. "I'll be there." The Westside Cafe was deliberately chosen for its location across town, far from both our workplaces. I arrived early, securing a corner table that offered privacy. When Allison walked in, I recognized her immediately from the Christmas party and Megan's photos, tall, blonde, confident. Today, however, she looked nervous, her usual poise replaced by visible anxiety. "Natalie," she said awkwardly as she sat down. "I don't know what Kyle told you, but..." "He told me everything," I interrupted. "About your year-long affair, the hotels, the lies. But that's not why I asked you here." Her face flushed. "Look, I never meant..." "Save it," I cut her off again. "Kyle was diagnosed with HIV yesterday. Dr. Hayes estimates he's been positive for at least a year, which coincides perfectly with the start of your relationship. You need to get tested immediately." All color drained from Allison's face. "That's not possible. He can't have. We used protection. Most of the time, anyway." "Most of the time isn't all the time," I said coldly. "And apparently, you weren't his only extracurricular activity." "What are you talking about?" Her shock seemed genuine. "He admitted to another affair with someone from his gym." Allison's hand flew to her mouth. "No. He told me I was the only one. He said his marriage was essentially over, that you two were staying together just for appearances." "Well, he lied to both of us then," I replied. "Our marriage was very much intact from my perspective. At least until yesterday." Tears welled in her eyes. "I would never have, if I had known." She struggled to form complete sentences. He told me you were separated but keeping it quiet because of your job at the school. That you were staying in separate bedrooms, just waiting for the right time to announce your divorce. I laughed bitterly. We've never spent a night in separate bedrooms until yesterday. He manipulated both of us, Allison. We sat in silence for a moment, two women processing the same man's betrayal from different angles. I need to get tested, she finally said, her voice small. Yes, you do. Today, if possible. I handed her the card from the testing center. They do rapid results. And you should call anyone else you've been with since Kyle. She nodded, staring at the card. I haven't been with anyone else. It's just been him. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and fear. I'm so sorry, Natalie. I truly believed he was available, that you two were already over. Under different circumstances, I might have hated her. But in that moment, I recognized in Allison another victim of Kyle's elaborate deceptions. Just get tested, I said, gathering my purse to leave. And maybe in the future, verify someone's marital status before jumping into bed with them. As I stood to go, Allison reached for my arm. What are you going to do? About Kyle, I mean. I paused, considering the question for the first time. I honestly don't know. But whatever it is, it's going to start with protecting myself, financially, legally, and emotionally. When I returned home, Kyle was packing a suitcase in our bedroom. He looked up as I entered, his expression a mixture of resignation and relief. I'm going to a hotel, he said quietly. I think we both need some space to process everything. I nodded, unexpectedly grateful for his decision. That's probably best. As he zipped the suitcase closed, he hesitated. I called Allison. Told her everything. I know, I replied. She told me at the cafe. His head snapped up. You met with her? I had to make sure she knew. I couldn't trust that you'd actually tell her the truth. I leaned against the doorframe, suddenly exhausted. You told her we were separated, Kyle. That we were headed for divorce. He had the decency to look ashamed. I needed her to believe there was a future for us. Was there? Did you plan to leave me for her? Kyle sat heavily on the edge of the bed. I don't know what I planned. Everything just happened. And then kept happening. As he carried his suitcase downstairs, he turned to me one last time. For what it's worth, I really am sorry, Nat. I never meant for any of this to happen. I met his gaze steadily. Choices have consequences, Kyle. You made yours. Now we both have to live with them. After he left, I moved mechanically through the house, locking doors, turning off lights. In our bedroom, my bedroom now, I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process the seismic shift in my reality. Less than 48 hours ago, I had been worried about my husband's mysterious illness. Now, I was facing a future without the marriage I thought I had, rebuilding a life shattered by betrayal. As painful as it was, there was also a strange sense of clarity emerging from the chaos. For the first time in months, I knew exactly what was happening. No more mysteries, no more unanswered questions about Kyle's behavior. The truth, as devastating as it was, provided a solid foundation from which to move forward. That night, I received a text from Allison. Test was negative. Thank you for making me get checked. I'm so sorry for everything. At least there was that small mercy. Whatever happened next, I would face it with the same strength that had gotten me through the past 2 days. The days following Kyle's departure blurred together in a haze of emotional exhaustion and practical necessities. I took a week off from the school, claiming a family emergency. Principal Forrest was understanding, asking no questions beyond whether I needed any support. I wasn't ready to share the truth, not when I was still processing it myself. Sleep eluded me most nights. I would lie awake, reviewing our 8 years of marriage, searching for signs I might have missed. Had there been other affairs before Allison? How many lies had I unknowingly accepted as truth? The woman who had counseled countless teenagers through their problems now couldn't make sense of her own life. Grace came over almost daily, bringing food I barely touched and offering the quiet understanding of a friend who knew when to talk and when to simply be present. "You don't have to decide anything right now," she said as we sat on my patio 3 days after Kyle left. "Just focus on getting through each day." "I feel like I'm living someone else's life," I admitted. "Like I'll wake up any minute and find out this was all a terrible dream." Grace squeezed my hand. "I know. But you're stronger than you realize, Nat. And Tom and I are here for whatever you need." Their support was a lifeline in the darkness, but ultimately, the decisions ahead were mine alone to make. One sleepless night, around 3 a.m., I found myself in Kyle's home office. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, perhaps more evidence of his deceptions, or some explanation that would help me make sense of everything. In his desk drawer, I found statements for a credit card I didn't recognize. It wasn't one of our joint accounts, nor was it the company card I knew he had for business expenses. As I flipped through the statements, a pattern emerged. Hotel charges in the city and neighboring towns. Expensive restaurants. Jewelry purchases from high-end stores. The amounts were substantial. Far more than what could be justified for the occasional work dinner or client meeting he had claimed. My counselor's training kicked in, reminding me to document everything. I took photos of the statements with my phone, noting dates that corresponded with times Kyle had told me he was working late or away on business. The next morning, I called our bank to check on our joint accounts. The customer service representative was helpful but delivered another shock. "Mrs. Mitchell, there was a significant withdrawal from your joint savings account last month. $50,000. It was authorized with both account holders' information." "That's impossible," I said, my heart racing. "I never authorized any such withdrawal." "The transaction was completed in person at our downtown branch," she explained. "I can see the signature card here in our system." "My signature was forged," I insisted. "I need this investigated immediately." The bank promised to look into it and suggested I file a police report. They also recommended freezing our joint accounts to prevent any further unauthorized transactions. As I hung up, another disturbing thought hit me: our retirement accounts. I immediately logged into the investment platform where we held our 401(k)s and IRAs. My accounts appeared untouched, but Kyle showed a pattern of increasing withdrawals over the past 6 months, despite substantial early withdrawal penalties. He had systematically emptied nearly 2/3 of his retirement savings. I sank into a chair, trying to comprehend the financial betrayal on top of the personal one. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. Kyle had been systematically diverting funds. Planning, what exactly? My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Allison. "Natalie? I'm sorry to bother you, but there's something you should know." Her tone set off alarm bells. "What is it?" After our talk, I started looking into some things at work. Accounts Kyle had exclusive access to. I think he might be embezzling from the company." The room seemed to tilt. "What are you talking about?" "There are discrepancies in several client accounts he manages. Money transferred to offshore accounts, then covered up with falsified statements. I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't been specifically looking for suspicious activity." "How much money?" I asked, my mouth dry. "From what I can piece together so far, at least $800,000 over the past year." The amount was staggering. "Have you told anyone at the company?" "Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. This could mean serious criminal charges, Natalie." My mind raced. We need to be careful here. If he's really embezzled that much money, who knows what he might do if he feels cornered. "There's something else," Allison said hesitantly. "Last week, before all this happened, Kyle asked me if I'd ever thought about leaving everything behind and starting over somewhere new. He mentioned Costa Rica specifically, how they have good healthcare and no extradition treaty with the U.S. The pieces suddenly clicked into place with sickening clarity. The money withdrawals, the secret credit card, the mention of a country with no extradition treaty. Kyle hadn't just been having affairs, he'd been planning to disappear with stolen money. Allison, I think we need to take this to the authorities. Not just the company, but the police. Financial Crimes Division. I agree, she said. I've copied some of the documentation. We can meet with them together if you want. After hanging up, I called Grace, needing a sounding board from someone I trusted implicitly. He's been stealing from his company, I told her, still struggling to believe it myself. And from our joint accounts. He was planning to run away to Costa Rica. Jesus, Nat, Grace breathed. This just keeps getting worse. I'm going to the police with Allison tomorrow. She has evidence of the embezzlement. Are you sure that's safe? Grace asked, concern evident in her voice. If he's desperate enough to steal that kind of money, what choice do I have? If I do nothing, I could be implicated as an accessory. And the longer he has access to these accounts, the more money disappears. Just as we were finishing our conversation, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Bradley Wilson, CEO of Meridian Financial. I need to speak with you urgently regarding your husband. Please call me at this number at your earliest convenience. My stomach dropped. Had Allison gone to her boss despite our agreement to approach the authorities together? Or had someone else at the company discovered Kyle's theft? I called the number immediately. Mrs. Mitchell, thank you for returning my call so quickly. Bradley Wilson's deep voice carried the weight of authority. I apologize for contacting you this way, but the matter is extremely sensitive. I understand, I said, though I wasn't sure I did. We've discovered some concerning irregularities in accounts managed by your husband. Our internal audit team has been quietly investigating for several weeks. I'd like to meet with you in person, if possible. Several weeks? I repeated, surprised. You've been investigating Kyle already? Yes. A routine security check flagged some unusual transfer patterns back in January. We've been building a case since then. Mr. Wilson, I just learned about this today. I had no knowledge of any financial impropriety. That's precisely why I'd like to meet. We believe you may be able to help us understand the full scope of what's happened, and we want to ensure you're protected as this moves forward. We arranged to meet the following morning at a private room in a downtown hotel, neutral territory away from both my home and Meridian's offices. One more thing, Mrs. Mitchell, Bradley added before hanging up. I'd advise you not to discuss this with Kyle. For your own safety and the integrity of the investigation. I haven't spoken to him in days, I assured him. And after what I've learned, I don't plan to without a lawyer present. After ending the call, I sat motionless, trying to absorb this latest development. The man I had married, loved, and built a life with was not just a cheater who had endangered my health. He was a thief, possibly on the verge of fleeing the country. The Kyle I thought I knew would never have done any of this. But then, that Kyle had never existed at all. He was just a character in an elaborate performance, and I had been the most devoted member of his audience. The next morning, I met Bradley Wilson in the hotel's conference room. He was accompanied by a woman he introduced as Diane Mercer, Meridian's head of security and a former FBI financial crimes specialist. Mrs. Mitchell, Bradley began after we were seated. First, let me say how sorry I am that you've been drawn into this situation. From everything we've gathered, you appear to be as much a victim of your husband's actions as our company and our clients. I appreciate that, I said. But I'm still trying to understand the scope of what Kyle has done. Diane opened a laptop and turned the screen toward me. Over the past 14 months, Kyle has diverted approximately $2.1 million from various client accounts to offshore holdings, primarily in the Cayman Islands and Belize. He's created an elaborate paper trail of falsified statements to conceal these transfers. The amount was more than double what Allison had estimated. I felt physically ill. We've also discovered, Bradley continued, that he's been making preparations to leave the country. He's applied for residency in Costa Rica under a healthcare visa program, citing his recent HIV diagnosis. So that part was true, at least. Kyle really was using his illness as part of his escape plan. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Your cooperation," Diane said simply. "We're working with the FBI on this case, and they'll want to speak with you. We also need to determine whether any of the stolen funds were directed to accounts or assets you might have access to." "I've discovered unauthorized withdrawals from our joint savings," I told them. "And substantial early withdrawals from his retirement accounts. I've frozen what accounts I can, but I don't know what else might be out there." Bradley nodded grimly. "That's helpful information. We'd like to bring in law enforcement at this point, if you're comfortable with that." "I was planning to go to the police today anyway," I admitted. "Allison Parker contacted me yesterday about her suspicions." Bradley and Diane exchanged glances. "Ms. Parker has been very helpful in our investigation," Diane said carefully. "Though she may have her own legal issues to address regarding her knowledge of certain transactions." I realized then that Allison's involvement might be more complicated than she had let on. Had she known about the embezzlement all along? Was her reaching out to me just an attempt to save herself? "I want to help however I can," I said firmly. "Kyle has destroyed enough lives already." By the end of our 3-hour meeting, I had agreed to assist in a carefully orchestrated plan to gather the final evidence needed to arrest Kyle for wire fraud, embezzlement, and several other financial crimes. The FBI would be brought in officially the next day. As I left the hotel, I felt a strange sense of calm amidst the chaos. For the first time since the doctor's office, I had a clear path forward. It wouldn't be easy, but at least I knew what needed to be done. The following day, I met with Jessica Daniels, a divorce attorney recommended by Grace's cousin who specialized in high-conflict cases involving financial deception. Her office was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold reality of my situation. "Mrs. Mitchell," she began after I'd outlined my situation, "I want to be very direct with you. Based on what you've told me, your husband has not only betrayed your marriage but has engaged in criminal financial activities that could potentially implicate you." I had no knowledge of any of it, I insisted. "I believe you," she assured me. "But the courts will need evidence of that. My first recommendation is that we hire a forensic accountant to trace every financial transaction over the past 2 years. We need to establish a clear record of your non-involvement in the embezzlement scheme." "Whatever it takes," I agreed. "Cost isn't an issue." Jessica's expression grew serious. "Speaking of costs, have you checked your home equity line of credit recently?" I felt a chill. "No." "Why?" "In cases like this, it's common for the offending spouse to max out all available credit before disappearing. It would be wise to check immediately." I called our mortgage company from her office. My fears were confirmed. Our HELOC, which had previously been untouched, had been drawn down to its maximum limit of $175,000 just 3 weeks earlier. "He forged my signature again," I said numbly after hanging up. "He's cleaned out everything he can access." Jessica made a note. "We'll add that to the financial injunction we're filing today." "Now, about the cooperation you've agreed to with Meridian Financial and the FBI." We spent the next hour crafting a strategy that would protect my interests while assisting in the investigation. Jessica would serve as my legal representative in all dealings with law enforcement to ensure I didn't inadvertently implicate myself in Kyle's schemes. As we wrapped up our meeting, Jessica asked about the forensic accountant. "I recommend Simon Wells. He specializes in cases involving hidden assets and financial fraud. He's expensive but extremely thorough." "Hire him," I said without hesitation. "I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with." Simon called me the next day, requesting access to all our financial records. His preliminary findings, delivered just 48 hours later, were worse than I'd imagined. "Mrs. Mitchell," he began during our video call, his serious expression making my heart sink. "I've identified a pattern of systematic fund diversion going back approximately 18 months. In addition to the embezzlement from Meridian, your husband has siphoned roughly $380,000 from your joint assets. How? I asked, stunned by the amount. I would have noticed that much money missing. He was quite sophisticated in his approach, Simon explained. He used a combination of forged signatures, falsified statements, and what appears to be a shadow accounting system. Most of the diverted funds were transferred to an offshore account in Belize, registered under a shell company called Mitchell Ventures. I've never heard of Mitchell Ventures, I said. That's not surprising. The company was incorporated 16 months ago, using documentation that bears your signature, almost certainly forged, based on comparison with your known signatures. The deception was so thorough, so calculated, that it left me breathless. Kyle hadn't just been stealing, he'd been meticulously planning his exit for well over a year. There's one more thing, Simon added. I've identified several cash transfers to an individual named David Lerner. Regular payments of $5,000, always on the 15th of each month, starting about 14 months ago. The name was familiar. David works with Kyle at Meridian. They're friends. Kyle said they play racquetball together. Well, they're doing something together, but I doubt it's just racquetball. These payments total $70,000 so far, and there's no legitimate business purpose I can identify. After ending the call with Simon, I immediately contacted Diane Mercer at Meridian Security. Her response to the David Lerner information was immediate and alarming. Lerner has access to the same client accounts as your husband, she said. And he's been out sick since the day after our internal audit began. We've been trying to reach him for questioning. The pieces were falling into place. Kyle hadn't been working alone, he had an accomplice. And now both of them had gone to ground, likely preparing for their escape. I shared this information with the FBI agents assigned to the case, who confirmed they were already investigating Lerner. We believe he's the one who set up the offshore accounts, Agent Torres told me. He has a background in international banking that Mitchell lacks. The investigation accelerated over the next few days. The FBI obtained warrants for Kyle and David's financial records, electronic communications, and travel histories. Meanwhile, I remained in a strange limbo, sleeping poorly and jumping at every unexpected sound in the house. Despite Jessica's assurances that Kyle was likely long gone, I couldn't shake the fear that he might return. That fear was validated when my phone rang late one evening. Kyle's name flashed on the screen. Following the FBI's instructions, I recorded the call. Natalie, Kyle's voice sounded strained. We need to talk. I don't think we have anything to discuss without our lawyers present, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Look, I know you're upset, and you have every right to be. But there are things you don't understand. Things I can explain if you'll just give me a chance. Like the $2.1 million you stole from your clients? Or the $380,000 you took from our joint accounts? Or maybe the helic you maxed out with my forged signature? My voice rose with each question. A long silence followed. When Kyle finally spoke, his tone had changed completely. Who have you been talking to? Everyone, Kyle. Meridian knows. The FBI knows. It's over. Another pause. I need to see you. Just once more, to explain everything. I owe you that much. Warning bells rang in my head. No. Absolutely not. Nat, please. Tomorrow night. Our house. I just want to talk, and then I'll go away forever. I promise. Against my better judgment, against the explicit instructions of the FBI and my lawyer, a plan began forming in my mind. Kyle clearly didn't realize how much the authorities knew. If I could get him to confess, to reveal where all the money had gone, perhaps even implicate David Lerner more clearly. Fine, I said finally. Tomorrow at 7. But I'm not promising anything. Thank you, he breathed, sounding genuinely relieved. You won't regret this. After hanging up, I immediately called Agent Torres. Kyle just contacted me. He wants to meet tomorrow night. That's unexpected, she said. We thought he'd already left the country. Apparently not. He says he wants to explain everything. This could be an opportunity, Torres said thoughtfully. With your permission, we could set up surveillance equipment in your home. If he confesses or reveals information about the stolen funds or his plans. Do it, I said without hesitation. Whatever it takes to end this. The next morning, a team of FBI technicians arrived at my house disguised as cable repair workers. They installed hidden microphones and cameras in the living room and kitchen, the most likely places for our conversation. Agent Torres briefed me on how to guide the conversation toward the embezzlement without arousing Kyle's suspicion. Remember, your safety is the priority, she emphasized. We'll have agents stationed nearby. If at any point you feel threatened, use the panic word vacation, and we'll intervene immediately. As 7 p.m. approached, I found myself oddly calm. The whirlwind of betrayal, shock, and fear had solidified into a cold determination to see this through. Kyle had destroyed our marriage, endangered my health, and stolen our future. Now, he would face the consequences. The doorbell rang precisely at 7. I took a deep breath and opened the door to face the stranger who had once been my husband. Kyle stood on our doorstep looking nothing like the confident financial advisor I'd been married to for 8 years. His clothes hung loosely on his frame, emphasizing the weight he'd lost. Dark circles underscored his eyes, and his usually immaculate hair was disheveled. Despite everything, a small part of me ached at the visible evidence of his illness. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, his voice hoarse. I stepped aside wordlessly to let him in, remembering Agent Torres's advice, let him do most of the talking, ask open-ended questions, and avoid making accusations that might put him on the defensive. Kyle hesitated in the entryway, looking around as if seeing our home for the first time. "You've changed things." I hadn't changed anything, but I didn't correct him. "Would you like something to drink?" I asked, deliberately keeping my tone neutral. "Just water, thanks." In the kitchen, I filled a glass from the filtered pitcher, buying myself a moment to steady my nerves. When I returned, Kyle had settled on the edge of our couch, his posture tense. "So," I said, handing him the water and sitting in the armchair across from him, maintaining a safe distance. "You wanted to talk." Kyle took a long sip before responding. "I know you've learned a lot of disturbing things in the past week. About me, about our marriage." I wanted to explain. "I'm listening," I said, folding my hands in my lap to keep them from shaking. "First, about Allison and the others." He looked down at his hands. "It was never about you, Nat. You were always enough. I don't know how to explain it. It was like I was living 2 different lives. Or 3 or 4, depending on how many women you were seeing," I couldn't help interjecting. He winced. "I deserve that. But you have to believe me when I say I never stopped loving you. Love doesn't behave like that, Kyle." He nodded slowly. "You're right. What I did was unforgivable. The lies, the cheating, putting your health at risk. I have no excuse." "And the stealing?" I asked, deliberately steering the conversation toward the embezzlement. "Do you have an excuse for that?" Kyle's expression shifted subtly. "That's complicated. $2.1 million from Meridian clients. $380,000 from our personal accounts. $175,000 from our home equity line. That doesn't seem complicated. It seems like theft." His eyes widened slightly. "You've been busy. You left me no choice." Kyle leaned forward, suddenly intense. "Natalie, I need you to understand something. What happened at Meridian isn't what you think. I didn't start this." "Then who did?" "David Lerner?" I was taking a risk mentioning David, but I needed to get Kyle talking about his accomplice. The surprise on his face confirmed my suspicion. "How do you know about David?" The $5,000 monthly payments were a bit obvious, I said, purposely vague to encourage him to fill in the details. Kyle rubbed his face wearily. It all started about 18 months ago. David approached me with what he called a financial opportunity. He had identified weaknesses in Meridian's security protocols that would allow us to divert funds from dormant client accounts to offshore holdings. And you just agreed? To steal from your clients? No, not at first, Kyle insisted. I told him he was crazy. But then... He paused, seemingly weighing how much to reveal. David had leverage. He knew about Allison, had evidence of our affair. He threatened to expose us if I didn't cooperate. So blackmail turned you into a thief? I was skeptical, and my tone showed it. It's not that simple. Once I agreed to the first transfer, I was implicated. After that, it was easier to keep going than to stop. And then when I got sick... His voice trailed off. The HIV diagnosis, I prompted. Kyle nodded. When I first started feeling symptoms, I was terrified. I got tested privately, didn't want anyone at work to know. When the result came back positive, I panicked. American healthcare is a nightmare even with insurance. If I lost my job because of the embezzlement, I'd lose my health coverage. So I accelerated our plan. Costa Rica, I said. His eyebrows shot up. You know about that too? I know everything, Kyle. The residency application. The healthcare visa citing your HIV status. The fact that Costa Rica has no extradition treaty with the United States. Kyle set down his water glass with a shaky hand. David and I were supposed to leave last week. Separate flights, separate destinations initially, then meet up in San Jose. But then you convinced me to see Dr. Hayes, and everything got delayed. Where's the money? I asked, getting to the most critical question. Safe, he said cryptically. Untraceable cryptocurrency wallets, mostly. Some in traditional offshore accounts under shell corporations. And our money? The funds you took from our joint accounts, my retirement, the HELOC? Kyle had the decency to look ashamed. I needed it for the initial setup costs. The medical evaluations for the Costa Rica visa, the residency application fees, the property down payment. You bought property there? This was new information. A small villa in a gated community. Good security, private medical care nearby. He paused, then added, it's in both our names. The implication hung in the air between us. He had planned for me to join him eventually. You really thought I'd run away with you? After all your lies? I thought I could convince you, he admitted. Once everything was set up. Once I could explain that I did it all for us, for our future. For us? I repeated incredulously. You stole millions, cheated on me repeatedly, exposed me to HIV, and you think that was for us? The money was for us, Kyle insisted, an edge of desperation entering his voice. The affairs were a mistake. A terrible mistake. But the plan, the escape to Costa Rica, that was always meant to include you. When were you going to tell me? The night before the flight? Or were you planning to just kidnap me? Kyle's expression darkened. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The fear. Knowing that any day, everything could collapse. That I could end up sick and in prison, with nothing and no one. You did this to yourself, I reminded him. Every step of the way, these were your choices. And now you've gone to the authorities. It wasn't a question. Something in his tone sent a chill through me. You left me no choice, I repeated. Kyle stood abruptly, pacing the living room. So what happens now? FBI breaks down the door? Arrests me on the spot? I remained seated, trying to appear calmer than I felt. I don't know. That depends on you, I suppose. He stopped pacing, turning to face me with an unreadable expression. On me? You could cooperate. Tell them everything. Return the money. Maybe work out a deal. Kyle laughed bitterly. A deal? Natalie, I've stolen over $2 million. There's no deal that keeps me out of prison. Prison is better than running for the rest of your life. Is it? He stepped closer to me, his expression hardening. Because from where I'm standing, my options look pretty limited. Either I go to prison, where I'll receive substandard medical care at best, probably die of AIDS-related complications before my sentence is up. Or I take my chances on the run. I stood up, maintaining distance between us. There's a third option. You cooperate fully, make restitution, express remorse. With your health condition, you might serve a reduced sentence. Might, he repeated. That's not much to bet my life on. The tension in the room had shifted. Kyle's desperation was palpable, and for the first time, I felt genuinely afraid. What exactly did you come here for tonight, Kyle? What did you hope to accomplish? His eyes darted around the room before settling back on me. I needed to know how much you knew. How much they knew. Whether there was still a way out. There isn't, I said firmly. It's over. Kyle moved toward me again, and I took an instinctive step back. It's not over until I say it's over. I've worked too hard, planned too carefully to just give up now. Kyle. Where is it, Natalie? The recording device. Because I know this conversation is being recorded. His voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. I thought of the panic word. One mention of vacation and the FBI agents would burst in. But if I used it too soon, we might lose the evidence needed to connect Kyle definitively to the embezzlement and fraud. You're not thinking clearly, I said, trying to defuse the situation. If you run now, you'll be a fugitive forever. Is that really the life you want? What I want, Kyle said, advancing toward me again, is the life I planned. The money I've earned. The future I've sacrificed everything for. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small pistol. And I'm not leaving without insurance. My blood froze at the sight of the gun. This wasn't part of the plan. No one had anticipated Kyle would be armed. Put that away, I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite my racing heart. You're only making things worse. No, this is me taking control of the situation. He gestured toward the front door with the gun. We're going to walk out of here calmly. Get in my car. And then you're going to help me access the emergency funds I've set aside. I'm not going anywhere with you. You don't have a choice, Natalie. Not unless you want this to get messy. I needed to stall, to keep him talking while figuring out how to alert the FBI without triggering a potentially deadly confrontation. The funds, I said slowly. Where are they? Safety deposit box. Downtown. In both our names, so I need you there in person. How much? Enough to get me out of the country and established somewhere new. About $500,000 in bearer bonds and diamonds. I took a deep breath. Kyle, this is insane. You're talking about kidnapping me at gunpoint. That's a federal offense on top of everything else. I'm already facing life in prison, he said flatly. What's one more charge? Think about what you're doing, I pleaded. Even if you force me to the bank, how far do you really think you'll get? The FBI is already watching you. Kyle's eyes narrowed. What do you mean, already watching? I realized my mistake too late. I just mean they must be investigating by now. No, he said, stepping closer, the gun now pointed directly at me. You said already watching. Present tense. They're here, aren't they? Right now. There was no point in lying. Yes. Kyle's expression contorted with rage. You set me up. You were never going to help me explain. This whole thing was a trap. Kyle, please. Shut up. He shouted, waving the gun erratically. Just shut up and listen. We're walking out that door right now. If anyone tries to stop us, I swear to God, Natalie. I think I need a vacation, I blurted out, using the panic word. Kyle frowned in confusion. What are you? The front and back doors burst open simultaneously as FBI agents stormed in, weapons drawn. FBI. Drop the weapon. Drop it now, multiple voices commanded. Kyle spun toward the nearest agent, gun still in hand. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the wild look in his eyes, the tension in his trigger finger, the FBI agent adjusting his aim in response. Kyle, don't. I screamed. Whether he heard me or not, I'll never know. Kyle dropped to his knees, placing the gun on the floor and raising his hands above his head. The tension in the room deflated instantly as agents moved in to secure him and the weapon. Natalie Mitchell? A female agent approached me. I'm Agent Torres. Are you hurt? I shook my head, unable to form words as I watched other agents handcuffing Kyle. You did well, she assured me. We got everything on tape. The confession about the embezzlement, the offshore accounts, David Lerner's involvement, the property in Costa Rica. It's more than enough. As they led Kyle toward the door, he looked back at me one last time. The man I'd once pledged to love forever, now a stranger being taken away in handcuffs. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Whether he meant it or was just playing one final role, I'll never know. The FBI agents were efficient and professional, taking my statement and explaining what would happen next. Kyle would be charged with multiple federal crimes, wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, attempted kidnapping, and assault with a deadly weapon. David Lerner had been arrested earlier that day at an airport trying to flee the country. We'll need you to testify, Agent Torres explained. But with the recording and the financial evidence, it's an extremely strong case. After they left, taking Kyle with them, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by the remnants of what I'd once thought was a perfect life. The reality of what had just happened, that my husband had been prepared to kidnap me at gunpoint, began to sink in, and my body started to shake uncontrollably. I called Grace, who arrived within minutes and stayed with me through the night. As dawn broke, I realized that while the nightmare wasn't over, the worst of the danger had passed. Kyle was in custody. The authorities had what they needed to pursue justice. And I had survived. 6 months passed in a blur of legal proceedings, therapy sessions, and rebuilding efforts. Kyle had accepted a plea deal, confessing to all charges in exchange for being housed in a federal medical facility that could properly address his HIV treatment. He would serve a minimum of 15 years. David Lerner, facing similar charges but without the mitigating circumstance of a serious medical condition, received 25 years. Meridian Financial had been incredibly supportive throughout the ordeal. They'd made it clear from the beginning that they viewed me as another victim of Kyle's deception, not a co-conspirator. They even offered me a consultant position to help strengthen their security protocols, an irony not lost on me. With the help of Simon Wells, the forensic accountant, we'd managed to recover almost 80% of the stolen funds. Kyle's cooperation after his arrest had been instrumental in tracking down the various accounts and cryptocurrency wallets. The recovered money was being returned to the defrauded clients, with Meridian covering the remaining losses. My own financial situation had stabilized as well. While Kyle had emptied most of our joint accounts, my personal retirement funds remained untouched. The bank had reversed the fraudulent Helic transaction after an investigation confirmed the signature forgery. I wasn't wealthy, but I wasn't destitute either. Dr. Hayes had continued to monitor my health with regular HIV tests, all of which remained negative. Each negative result was another small victory, another reminder that I had escaped the worst consequences of Kyle's betrayal. Perhaps most surprisingly, Allison Parker and I had developed an unlikely friendship. Both deceived by the same man, we'd found common ground in our healing processes. She had left Meridian, using her experience to become an advocate for financial transparency and fraud prevention. We met for coffee monthly, sharing updates on our progress and supporting each other through the lingering aftershocks of Kyle's deception. The hardest decision had been what to do with the house. Every room held memories, both good and bad. After months of deliberation, I finally decided to sell it. The real estate market was strong, and the equity would provide a solid foundation for my fresh start. On my final day in the house, I was packing up Kyle's home office, the last room I'd left untouched since his arrest. I'd procrastinated this task, dreading the potential emotional landmines hidden among his belongings. As I emptied his desk drawer, I found a small USB drive taped to the underside of a false bottom. It wasn't labeled, and I had no idea what it might contain. Curiosity overcoming caution, I plugged it into my laptop. It contained a series of video files, each named with a date from the past 2 years. With trembling fingers, I clicked on the earliest one. Kyle's face filled the screen, looking much healthier than when I'd last seen him. Journal entry 1, he began. David approached me today with what he's calling a financial opportunity. Basically, he wants me to help him steal from client accounts. Says he's found a way to divert funds that's untraceable. I told him he was insane, but I watched in stunned silence as the video diary unfolded. Kyle had documented everything, his initial reluctance, David's blackmail regarding Allison, the first transfer, the gradual expansion of their scheme. He spoke with a clinical detachment that was chilling, describing the thrill of each successful transaction, the elaborate precautions they took to avoid detection. I clicked through more files, watching Kyle's transformation from reluctant participant to enthusiastic criminal. In one entry, he boasted about using my forged signature, laughing at how easy it had been to fool the bank. Then I reached a video dated shortly after his private HIV diagnosis, before I had convinced him to see Dr. Hayes. His demeanor had changed dramatically. I don't know how this happened, he said, his voice breaking. I've always been so careful with Allison, with the others. Protected sex, regular testing. It doesn't make sense. He paused, running his hands through his hair in obvious distress. Unless. God, I can't even say it. Unless it wasn't from the affairs at all. Unless it was from before. From college. I froze the video, my heart pounding. From college? Kyle and I had met in college. We'd been each other's only serious relationship. With shaking hands, I pressed play again. There was that semester abroad in Bangkok, Kyle continued. The night I can barely remember. The sex worker. I convinced myself it never happened, that I'd just gotten too drunk and passed out. But what if that's when I was infected? What if I'd been positive all this time, without knowing? The implications hit me like a physical blow. If Kyle had contracted HIV during college, before we met or early in our relationship. I clicked frantically through the files until I found one dated just after our visit to Dr. Hayes. Dr. Hayes confirmed what I feared, Kyle said, his face haggard. Based on the progression of the virus, I've likely been positive for years, not months. Which means I've been exposing Natalie all this time. He buried his face in his hands, and when he looked up again, his eyes were wet with tears. I've ruined everything. The affairs, the stealing, that was bad enough. But this? Knowing I could have infected my wife because of one stupid night in college that I tried to forget. How do I live with that? The final video entry was dated the night before our confrontation, just hours before his arrest. Tomorrow I see Natalie, he said, looking directly into the camera. One last time before I disappear. I should run now, tonight, but I can't leave without trying to explain. Not the whole truth, she can never know how long I've had HIV, that I've been risking her health for our entire marriage. But enough of the truth that maybe someday she'll understand why I did what I did. He sighed heavily. The money was always for both of us. For the medical care I knew I'd eventually need. For the life I wanted to give her. The affairs were a distraction, I guess. A way to feel something when everything else was spiraling out of control. He looked down, then back at the camera with resolute eyes. This will be my last entry. If you're watching this, Natalie, and somehow I didn't make it out. I'm sorry. For everything. I know that's not enough, but it's all I have left to offer. The screen went black. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this final revelation. Kyle hadn't just lied about his affairs or the embezzlement. He had potentially known about his HIV status for years, possibly since before our marriage, and had hidden it from me, gambling with my health and our future. Our entire relationship had been built on a foundation of lies so deep that I'd never even suspected their existence. Every moment we'd shared, every plan we'd made, every intimate connection, all of it was tainted by his deception. With hands that no longer shook, I ejected the USB drive and placed it in an envelope. The next day, I delivered it to the U.S. Attorney's Office handling Kyle's case, along with a detailed statement about when and where I had found it. This could result in additional charges, the prosecutor warned me. Knowingly exposing someone to HIV without disclosure is a crime in most states. I understand, I said calmly. Whatever happens, I need the truth to be known. 2 weeks later, I stood at the airport with a one-way ticket in hand. The house had sold quickly, and after settling all outstanding matters related to Kyle's case, I was finally free to begin again. Grace hugged me tightly at the security checkpoint. "Are you sure about this?" she asked for the 10th time. "You know you can stay with us as long as you need." I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. "I'm sure. This is something I need to do for myself." "Promise you'll call when you land?" "Promise," I assured her. "And you'll visit this summer?" "Wild horses couldn't keep us away," she said, wiping away a tear. As I boarded the plane, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. A routine doctor's visit that had unraveled my entire life. A diagnosis that had exposed a web of lies spanning nearly a decade. A confrontation that could have ended tragically but instead had set me free. I had lost so much. My marriage, my home, my sense of security and trust. But I had gained something invaluable, the truth. No matter how painful, truth was preferable to the beautiful lie I'd been living. The plane took off, lifting me away from the wreckage of my old life toward the promise of a new beginning. I didn't know what awaited me in my new home, what challenges or joys might lie ahead. But for the first time in longer than I could remember, the future was entirely my own to shape. As my old city disappeared beneath the clouds, I made a silent promise to myself: from now on, I would trust my instincts, value honesty above comfort, and never again ignore the warning signs that something wasn't right. The price of that lesson had been steep, but I would carry it with me always, a hard-won wisdom that no one could ever take away. Have you ever had your instincts warn you about someone close to you, but ignored those feelings because you wanted to believe in them? Comment below with your experiences. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, sometimes what freezes your blood today saves your life tomorrow. Thank